Hello everybody, welcome to Mortal Lens. My name is Bryce. Let's take a look at this 80mm Hasselblad lens, the 2.8 T-Star. This is off my 500cm black, and it's got a sticky timer inside, so all the shutter speeds are off. The low end speeds are extremely slow. I'll show you here just how bad it is. And what happens is over time, the old grease from the factory, and here you go. I mean, that was already a second. Yep, and finally, there it goes. So just over time, these lenses get old and the grease dries up and that sort of thing. So we're going to see if we can't fix it. So starting off here, we got a spinner wrench. We'll take off this front ring. It's just threaded in there. Shouldn't be too tight. And once you got it loose, you can take one of these rubber cups and unscrew it the rest of the way. So that takes off these two pieces, the ring with the serial number and this other piece that holds on filters and the cap. Now we've got this other ring with 3 screws in it, and that's got a little indexing mark, which we'll see later in the video how to use that. So once that's out, now we're pretty much there. We're ready to get the glass out. So again, we'll use that spinner wrench. Get that out nice and carefully. You don't want to slip off of this. I mean, it's really easy to slip and scratch up your element. And for safekeeping, I can use this other cup and just store it in there so the bottom element isn't touching. Next up, we got this plate, more screws. There's hundreds of screws in this lens. It's crazy. And I'm keeping tension down with my fingers until this point now, where we take, so this is like your aperture ring, shutter ring, the controls to set where the lens is going to be. Now we got this little ball, this little detent. This is what gives you the clicks. And you don't have to take it out. I found that this one was pretty loose. Usually they're not like extremely loose, but this one kind of popped right out, so I want to just keep it off to the side. Next up, we got a million screws here, and you got to be really careful. I think they're copper. They're a pretty malleable metal, so you don't want to strip them. If you don't push down hard enough or squeeze hard enough, they'll just strip right out, and there goes that. You'll never get them out. So just take your time. Make sure you got enough pressure. Now to get this section out is kind of a pain. It went in easier than it came out, and usually I have better luck, but just kind of wiggle back and forth. The best thing to do is to not force it. But there's that satisfying little click. We'll take this plate out. And I'm actually going to go to minimum focus distance because that bottom was scraping up my desk pretty good. So moving on, let's get this ring out. It's easier if you go from that side. And holding that ring down, I should have done this before that ring. You want to click the lens, fire the lens, just so nothing's under tension. And you can take this selector ring out. Now we're into the meat. This is the meat of the lens. So I always like to mark here on the gears, just the orientation, so I don't, mess up the timing. And now we can work on this piece. It's got a name. Don't know it. And watch out for that little spring. Be sure not to break it. Now, be sure to mark down this gap here between the wall and the timer module. Mine's about, 1.1 millimeters. So we'll remember that for later. And we're going to start with this screw, loosen that one. And this one in here, kind of a pain to get to, usually pretty tight. Just work on that. And once that's loose, you'll see the tension gets kind of shot out of it there. And you could pull the whole element out. This is the timer. This is what controls the shutter. And as you can see, when I wind it, it should go down on its own, but it wasn't. It was pretty gunked up. So here's some 91% isopropyl. We'll just flip that around in there. Clean in between the gears. And now we just want to make sure everything's moving smoothly. So if you pull that lever on the left and then kind of rock that piece on the right back and forth, you'll see that, that moves pretty good. So once you're satisfied with it, I actually went a lot longer than that, maybe a couple of minutes. Go ahead and blow any of the alcohol out. It should just evaporate on its own, but good to get that out of there. And test to see if it's working dry. You should let go and you should see it should wind down on its own. And when you pull this lever, it should be already at the bottom. So we're going to grease it up either way. I've got this 3-in-1 grease. And we'll just hit all these points. I think there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll just hit those with a little bit of grease. This is the bottom side, by the way. So once we got all those, just run it. Make sure everything feels good. This actually soaked up some of the grease, so I had to put a little bit more on that far left one. It picked up some of it, but once you're satisfied with that, go ahead and wipe off the excess. You don't have to go crazy with the grease, just need some. And there was some here, kind of just sitting there from whoever had done this last. I definitely noticed this lens has been opened up. But while we're here, let's check out the self-timer. This is your timer. So just let that run through. It felt fine. If it doesn't feel fine, if you think it needs some grease, it's the same process. You unscrew it and pull it out. Be sure to keep track. There's a lot more springs on that side. Let's get that screw in there, and we want that piece that I just moved, we want that pushed like toward the out of the barrel. And this piece here, you want that pushed in. We'll tighten the left one, the left screw. Make sure these gears are back in sequence. They shouldn't have moved, but if they did, be sure to fix it. And we got this other little screw. We'll put that back in there. And tighten that down. And here we're going to test the fitment. So a little bit off. It needs to go a little bit closer to the wall, so we'll loosen that one. And put the screwdriver head just to give me a little bit more control. Get that tightened up again. Just close the gap a little bit because we were at 1.1. And that's close enough. It's like 1.08. So we'll call that good. 0.9 maybe. Close enough. So tighten them both. Make sure they're both nice and tight. And we can start getting this back together. Be sure that that piece is on the right side and that piece is on the right side. Next up, the spring for that action is going to go on that post I just showed you. My freaking lens kept autofocusing on my hand. It was quite annoying. I typically would leave it on manual focus, but I tried autofocus for this video, and won't be doing that again. But anyway, just convince this piece to get in there. It should go eventually, but there is a piece you need to watch out for. There's this little like sawtooth piece down there, and we want to make sure that that's on top of the lowest point of that geared ring we just put in. So next up, make sure the gears are aligned. Make sure that self-timer tab is on that side of the tab. And we can get the shutter speed selector ring back in. You want to watch out for this little peg and that peg. They should be in that groove. The one on the bottom here should be in that groove. And the one on the left should be in that groove. Then we'll get this holder ring in. Always such a nice, satisfying sound. And I've got this nice tool, Hasselblad tool. This is to cock the lens. If you don't have something like this, just use a screwdriver, but be very careful not to slip and scratch anything. But this just makes it so easy. And here we're going to test for the first time. So your 1 second setting is here, right when that peg hits that little corner. Let's see how it sounds. That sounds pretty good to me. You know, this is my own lens, so I'm not too worried about it. It's close enough. So I think that'll do. Let's get this ring back on. Not sure where that little dent goes, but let's watch out for these springs. They need to go up to the right. There's one on each side. This one also goes up to the right. And getting this back in is usually a little easier than taking it out. Still takes some time. Just don't force it. It'll go eventually. And there we go. Nice little click. So let's get these screws tightened. I think there's nine of them total. And just take your time. The best thing to do is take your time. If you strip them out, you're not going to get them back in, or you're not going to get them out. You won't find replacements. So best to just take your time with that. And here's the aperture preview, making sure that's working. It's a little bit slow, but it'll do for me. We'll get that ball detent back in, and we can start on these 4 rings. So this is your aperture ring. You want to make sure that this hole interfaces with the actual ring, which is way down there on that side. So that'll sit nicely in there. And of course, be sure that the shutter ring tab is above. Now this little spacer goes down, and the shutter speed selector goes into the shutter speed tab. they'll all kind of stick together real nice. Just to confirm, everything's working good. Don't lose that ball, you'll never find it again. And now this ring, there's a little hole, a circular hole, maybe a recess, and that goes around the ball detent. Just like that. We'll get the 3 little screws back in. Tighten them down. And let's confirm one more time that everything's working good. Feels smooth. Nothing's bound. Let's see if the aperture preview's still working. Perfect. Again, a little bit slow, but it'll do for me. And we're ready to put the elements back in. So let's dust these off. Drop that in there. And you want it tight, but not crazy tight. Next up, this piece has a little stopper, and that's for like a lens cap. So I'll look at my other lens, and you see that's at the bottom. So that means the detent goes down there on the bottom right. So we'll tighten this ring down. And this will kind of just slot into place on its own. Beautiful. Next up, the ring. So this holds that piece in, surprisingly. We'll use that rubber cup again, make things easier. And once again, we want it tight, but not over tight. So just a little further, about there. And that'll do it. So let's just check one more time, see if everything's working functionally. Love all the sounds of this camera. That sounds like a second to me. And let's check to see the pre-fire works. Perfect. And one more time with the 500th. Super quick. Anyway, that's about it. That's how to clean up your shutter timer. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And I'll catch you next time.